I'll tell you, it's certainly an honor for me to be able to be here today with Ms. Ozie Gonzaque as we continue with our Distinguished Leader Series. Ms. Gonzaque has been somebody who has been a hero to many in the city and county of Los Angeles for so many years. I've watched her in action in her own way, her own leadership style, be able to influence things in California and across the nation by her actions. She tells it like it is, she walks the talk, and she holds people accountable, but she holds herself accountable too to a very high standard. And so when we look back on leaders, we only can hope to emulate somebody like Ms. Gonzaque, who for so long has done the right thing for the right reasons. And thank you for being here with us today. This is an honor for me to be able to spend this time with you. I had the opportunity to read your book, and it is really, really powerful. And it shows, I think, that to anybody who is willing to spend the time and get an education through that book, that you will overcome obstacles if you work hard, if you persevere and do the right thing, good things will come. And you'll be able to achieve things that you never thought you could. And so I look at you as a role model for myself and for so many others, that if we watch what you did, how you conducted yourself, the power that you had, the loyalty, the leadership qualities, and just the integrity to be able to do the right thing for the right reasons, we could all do ourselves a service by emulating what you did. So thank you again for joining us, and please, if you would, feel free to talk at length, if you would, about your history, where you grew up, and just educate us as we move along here in your journey.
Well, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you. All the years I've known you, you've been a dear friend.
Thank you, Ozie.
You've been the same dedicated person that I met years ago, and I always admired your determination to do things right.
Thank you.
I always admired that about you. So I want to thank you for being a friend for so many years and being a true friend and a true dedicated person to the community, which you have been.
Thank you. I'm honored that you would say that. Thank you. If you would take us on the start of your journey, where you were born, a little bit about your family. Your parents, I know, were a tremendous influence on who you are to this day. And just give us kind of a flavor for what you bring to, what you brought to Los Angeles and what you bring to our society today, and the legacy that you have bestowed upon us here in Los Angeles, but also I think anybody who can be influenced by the book or hopefully by this video that we're so fortunate to be able to make with you, I think you will leave a lasting impression on them.
Thank you. I truly feel and believe that anything that I have done positive in my life, anything that I've accomplished in trying to make changes, I owe to my parents. I had parents who were dedicated people. They were honest people, Southerners.
Yeah.
And you hear so much about Southern people and what they went through. I was raised by a Southern family till I was 17 years old when I came here. But my father and mother, it didn't matter whether it was north, south, east, or west. There were rules and there were principles in our house. And you abided by the rule in the house. It didn't matter where you lived, the community you lived in. My dad used to always say, the law is the law for the county and the country, but the rule is in this house.
Yeah.
And he meant that. My mother meant that. And so they raised us with a feeling of, you determine your destination. You determine whether you're going to be a decent person, whether you're going to contribute something in this life, or whether you're going to be a taker all your life. Mm. And they never allowed us to be takers. We always had to do what was right And we always was taught, if you can help someone, help them. Don't wait for them to beg you to help. If they need help, help them if you can. So we were raised with that principle. And it stayed with me all of my life.
Right.
When we would hear people, as a matter of fact, when we were growing up, if we would complain about something, my mother would say, well, what are you willing to do about it? And if we said nothing, she said, then you don't have a right to sit there and complain.
Wow.
Anybody can complain. But if you're not willing to try to change it, don't sit there and complain about it. So we were raised that way. And that's why when I came here and I saw there were so many things going on in the community.
Yeah.
I saw things that I had never seen in the South. I saw a hate that I had never seen in the South. Everybody talked about the South, how bad it was, but I never experienced that in the South. So when I came here, it was absolutely amazing to me, to see the kind of hate and the kind of things that people were doing to each other. Mm. And it made me more determined. I don't know what I can do, but if there is something I can do, I'm going to do it.
Well, you sure did. When you came here, what year was that?
42.
1942?
1942.
Well, you've seen some changes in Los Angeles and America.
All of this was farmland.
Wow.
The Japanese farmed this. And this was built like in 43. The government ordered them to use this land because they needed housing.
Okay.
And that's why this was used. And it was a beautiful community.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's been damaged so much by a riot that was not caused here.
Right.
It was people who came in here and did the riot, but we paid the price for it. It's been a struggle because people automatically make up their mind. If you live in Watts, you live in the ghetto. You have no principles. And that is so far from the truth. This was one of the nicest communities you would want to live in. But after the riot, it got that name, and people didn't even know about the community, but they were labeling it as a ghetto.
And that was 1965?
Yes.
Yeah.
After the 1965 riot. They literally destroyed this community.
Wow.
By naming it a ghetto, and it was this. And there's some of the best neighbors in this community you would ever want to see.
Absolutely. And your area here, your home is absolutely beautiful. And thanks for having us in. Yeah.
I had to be taken to the hospital when I had the heart attack. And when the ambulance was there, I was so embarrassed because about 8 neighbors looked, and all the neighbors said, is there anything we can do?
Yeah.
That's the kind of neighbors they are.
That's great. Yeah. That's the definition of good neighbors. Yeah.
Yes.
Looking out for each other.
And I could live here peacefully. Anybody come near this house, there's 3 or 4 neighbors that's checking it.
That's great.
To see if I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sad that the community has had to go through what this community has had to go through with falsehoods.
Yeah.
And I've lived here all these years. I was a commissioner with the Housing Authority for 20 years.
Right.
I've had to work in Hollywood and other areas, and I've prayed to get back to Watts.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been in areas that I actually prayed to get back to Watts.
Right.
People care about each other.
Yeah.
They look out for each other. But it's unfortunate that rumors and innuendos and all kinds can destroy a community.
Absolutely.
Just like it can destroy a person.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that today on social media where somebody puts something out there and it's hard to unring the bell when something is said. I think it's as pronounced today as we've ever seen it, to go back to your point about divisiveness and the condition of things as we move forward. If you would, you are a walking treasure of Los Angeles history. And the people that you've dealt with over the years that you've lived in Los Angeles and the impact you've made on what Los Angeles today is, the success of Los Angeles, and being a place that the rest of the world in many ways looks to for answers. But I could go in 20 different directions with what could be chapters in a book about what you've done. But if you would, if you could just tell us a little bit about when you first got here, you know, how you met people and who you met and what impact they had on you and you on them.
In this community?
Sure, in Los Angeles.
Well, when my family moved here, I was 17 years old. And my sister was working at the place called the Alabama. And so she said, I'm going to get you a job, so I want you to stay and work. And I was supposed to be going back home.
Right.
But my father had paid for his property in Louisiana, and he went to get his deed. And when he went to get the deed, they told him, no, we keep the deed. We'll give you a copy. And it made my dad so mad, he said, if I can pay for my property and I can't have the deed, I don't need to live here. So I was out here visiting my sisters. He called and he said, go find a place to buy.
Wow.
So I started looking, and it wasn't nice here. You heard so much about California, it was not.
Yeah.
In fact, a lady had bought a house on 18th and Central. You know where 18th and Central is?
Sure.
She bought that house, and it happened to have a swimming pool. When she went to work, they threw all of her furniture in the swimming pool.
Wow.
And she was so upset. I don't know if you've ever heard of the 100 Black Women.
Sure.
That's when it was formed. She's the one that organized it, because when she went to work, she got 2 friends to guard her house every day.
Wow.
So it was times that I had heard, you know, how California was so, but when I saw some things that happened here, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe some of the things that you had to go through here. For instance, blacks couldn't buy west of Maine. Well, they didn't say you couldn't.
Yeah.
But if you tried to buy, they triple the price.
Right.
So it was that kind of little things that I had never seen, even in the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I watched it, and I grew up, and I started, when my sister told me she was going to get a job, I started working at the Alabama, because it was next door to where she worked.
Okay, that was a restaurant.
Yes, yes. And Tom Bradley, he was, I think, the only minority on the police department at that time.
Wow.
He was a young police officer, and he became my friend. He became like my brother. As a matter of fact, I'd get off at night, and he'd say, no, you wait. I'll get off and I'll take you home, because he didn't want me to. So he became like my big brother.
Wow.
And in fact, when I was working there, I knew girls that would, oh, she's a waitress. Yeah, I am a waitress. But I was going home with a pocket full of money every night, and they were in their little office jobs making tiddlywink.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I worked there, and I was able to buy my first car.
Wow.
Working as a waitress, because Cesar Romero used to come in to the place,
Right, the actor.
and he wouldn't let anybody wait on him but me.
Wow.
Doris Day would come in. There was a lot of movie stars that went into that when it was open.
Wow.
So I worked as a waitress, because I was taught by my parents, it doesn't matter what the job is if it's an honest job. I think sometimes we teach children the wrong values, that it may be hard work and honest work, but it's beneath you. No, it isn't.
Right.
If it's honest work and you're honest, then do the job.
What a great message to give to kids.
Absolutely.
And you listen to every bit of it. Yeah.
And my mother was so well respected, my mother and my father.
Yeah.
We lived in Monroe until I was 17 years old, like I said. And my mother's friends were not just black people. They were Italians. They became friends.
Right.
And they remained friends until they died.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on the people.
Sure.
You know, people set the rules, and they decide what you should and should. I think that's a personal thing. My mother and father used to say, God puts you here with a brain, use your own brain.
Yeah.
Don't let somebody tell you what to think about anybody. And I remember there was a little girl in Louisiana. They were from New York, and the company transferred them to Monroe. And there was a young couple. She was pregnant with her first child, and she had a very difficult pregnancy. Mm. Well, they were there with no family, nobody. And my mother went and took care of her. Wow. They didn't have money to pay my mother. Mm-hmm. They didn't pay, but my mother went every day. And when she had the baby, she was in the hospital and my mother went every day when she got home and took care of her and the baby. Mm. And there was no pay.
Yeah.
But she loved my mother to the point they were transferred back to New York. And when they went back to New York, every holiday, every Christmas,
right,
they drove all the way from New York to see my mother.
That's amazing.
She said my mother became the mother she didn't have.
Wow.
It was a white couple.
Yeah.
So, like I'm saying, I'm a Southerner.
Yeah.
But I never experienced a lot of the things that I hear about people.
Right.
I never experienced any of that.
Right. So people as people in general. Yeah.
And that's the way my family lived.
Yeah. That's instructive to all of us today.
That's right.
You know, as too often we focus on the differences between people rather than the similarities, because at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same. We all want the same things and want our kids to be better off than we were. And
well, absolutely, because when the McDonnell Commission came in here, if you remember.
Sure.
Well, they called, and they said they wanted me to testify, and I said, I don't want to testify. They said, we don't care, we'll subpoena you. So I said, well, if they're going to subpoena me, I guess I'll have to go. So I went, walked in, and the man asked, what did LAPD represent to me? And that's when I turned in that motto, to protect and to serve. That's just what I had always believed.
Yeah.
And so he said, no, don't tell me. Write it and put it in the box. So I did. I wrote it and put it in the box, and I made a copy and put it in my pocket. And then I went in to testify. And the commissioner was asking me, why did I feel there was such hate between the police and the minority community? And I said, you want me to answer that? And he said, yes. I said, well, because you have constables hiring constables. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, you have people hiring police officers. They don't have a clue as to what that police officer's responsibility is. So they send them out into the minority community. And it's never anything about working together.
Right.
It's always hate between, it's implied and it's taught in the hiring. And I said, until that change, you will never see a difference in the communities and the police department. And that's what I really believed.
Yeah.
I told them, I'm not trying to say anybody should run anything, but at least give the community a chance to get to know each other. 4 weeks after I testified, they called me from downtown. Mm. So I was the first minority to ever serve on the oral board.
Oh, wow. Outstanding.
That's how it happened.
That's amazing. You know, you went over it, but I don't know enough for everybody watching this to appreciate what you said about to protect and serve. The motto that's now the Los Angeles Police Department motto, the motto that is on the side of every black and white police car, on the door. You were the one that came up with that and memorialized it in testimony for the McCone Commission?
That's what I always believed it
Yeah.
was for, to
Yeah.
protect and to serve.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. In fact, I came home and I was telling my husband that what had transpired, and that they asked me to write it down, and I did, and I put it in the... And so about 6 months later, he came home and he said, honey, what did you say you said when they asked you what LAPD represented? And I repeated it. He said, it's on the police cars now. And I said, oh, come on, because he was always teasing me.
Yeah.
I said, oh, come on, honey. He said, no, it's on the police cars now.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. I didn't know.
No, that's a great piece of history there. I wasn't aware of that until very recently, and amazing. One of many that we'll talk about that you've left a mark, certainly on...
Well, you know, one of the reasons, and as I was telling the commissioner with the McCone Commission, when he was asking me why did I feel there was so much, you know, hate, I said, people don't get to know each other.
Right.
They judge each other through other people's eyes. We have to learn to judge people as we know them. It doesn't matter whether they're black, white, or purple to me.
Right.
Because I have friends in every race you want to name.
Right.
Color has never meant anything to me.
Right.
Mainly, I guess, because my grandfather was Irish on my father's side. On my mother's side, my father was Indian and black as a boot.
Okay.
So my family has been mixed up all my life. So people waste time on hating people and about race and all. It has nothing to do with it.
No.
You know?
No, that's a great lesson for everyone as a takeaway. You know, you talked about being a commissioner. Let's go back if we could. And how did you talked about meeting Tom Bradley as a police officer. He then eventually became the first African-American lieutenant on the LAPD and then went on from there. And if you would tell us a little bit about that relationship and then others within policing and within the city structure, if you would.
Yes, he truly became my brother. He was like my full brother. I don't care where it was, whatever happened. If I called him, he was there.
Wow. And
we remained friends. And I've seen so many people who didn't like him and they accused him of, well, you know, I didn't know that part of Tom Bradley. The Bradley that I knew was a hardworking, honest person.
Right.
But I think people take too much responsibility of blaming somebody else because somebody told them something.
Right.
No, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons I went and met William Parker, this lady came to me and she was calling him every name in the book. And she really hated him. And I said, why do you hate this man so bad? Do you know him? She said, no, I've never met him. And I thought, how can you waste that much time on a person you never even met? And she said, well, everybody says he's a SOB, he's a racist. I said, he could be. I don't know. I don't know the man.
Right.
And then I thought about it and I said, you know, I'm going to meet him. I'm going to find out if he's the booger bear they say he is.
Yeah.
So I picked up the phone and I called the station. And I said, I want to meet with the chief. And they said, what do you want to meet about? I said, I want to meet about my community. So I guess he thought, well, so he gave me the appointment. So he said, what can I do for you? And I just told him what I thought. I said, Chief, I'm here because I understand you don't like black people. I understand they said you're a racist. I don't know whether you are or not. But I'm here for one reason. You're the chief of police, and I'm here because I am a black woman in a black community. And I wanted to ask you, will you work with my community? And he looked at me and he said, I give you my word. I will work with your community.
Wow.
And from that day till the day that man died, we were friends.
Wow.
We were friends. His wife invited me to his service.
Wow.
I couldn't go because I'd had surgery for cancer.
Yeah.
But we remained friends until he died.
Wow. And for the record, he was appointed police chief in 1950 and passed away in office in 1966.
Yes.
And so although a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then, you remember it like it was yesterday.
You know, it's so easy to put people in that little ball and label them.
Yeah.
And like I told him, he has a right to hate anybody he want to hate. I don't care whether he liked me or not. I just care whether he's going to do the job as chief of police.
Right.
That's all I cared about. And we became friends.
Wow.
And I felt bad when I used to hear people say things, and a lot of things that I know he did as chief, they never knew about, but he changed a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. As Chief Parker went on with his career in office, were you able to provide on occasion input as to what your perspectives were on the department, on the community, and the needs of the community?
Yes, because you know one thing, if I called his office and left a message, he would call me back.
Ah.
So I was able to talk to him. I was able to express things that I felt. And I told him, you know, it doesn't have to be a personal relationship. We just need to learn to respect each other.
Right.
The police respect the community and the community respect the police. That's all we really need to live together.
Yeah. And then he stayed true to what he said. He would stay in touch and look out for the community?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a piece that I don't think is out there very much. And
well, see, everybody had made up their mind about him.
yeah.
I don't think people even took the time to try to find out.
Yeah.
It's the same way when people judge a whole community. Steve Gates called me. You know Steve
Sure,
Gates.
oh, sure, yeah.
He called me one day and he said, Ozie, I need you to attend this meeting. And I had an appointment. I didn't want to go. He said, Ozie, I need you. So I canceled the appointment and I went to the meeting. When I got to the meeting, the room was full of police officers and they were looking at me smiling, and I'm wondering, what have I got to do with this?
Yeah.
What are they looking at me for?
And at the time, Steve Gates was the LAPD captain for Southeast Division.
Right, he was captain at Southeast.
Which is this area.
Police station.
Yeah, gotcha.
Steve Gates was. And so when I walked in and sat down, this man came up and he says, I'm from USC. And I was paid by the federal government to do a survey of Watts. I've done my survey and I'm here to make the report. That's why Steve Gates wanted me there.
Right.
I didn't know it, but that's why he wanted me there. And he started talking about, I've done my survey. 90% of the people in Watts are illiterate. Mm. And 80% live in Watts because they can't live anywhere else. And I'm looking at this man thinking, where did this man come from?
Right.
What zoo did he come from?
Yeah.
And he kept talking about we lived here because we couldn't live anywhere else, and all kind of stuff that he was saying. So when he finished, I asked him, I said, who did you interview in this community? Oh, I got it on good authority, you know. And I said, and they told you that people live here because they can't live anywhere else? I said, my husband's been with Hughes 30 years. I think we could have afforded to move if we wanted to move. I chose to live in my house in Watts. I was so angry with this man because he's putting lies in community he doesn't know anything about.
Right.
I asked him, I said, how much volunteer work have you ever done? He said, I don't volunteer, I work. I said, so does my husband.
Right.
Does your wife do volunteer work? No, she doesn't do volunteer work. I said, that's obvious too. But you're going to come over here and judge my community. And I told him to his face, I said, it's people like you who kill communities with lies. You know nothing about my community, and you're over here lying and saying that. And I said, let me tell you about the Parkside Manor that I live in.
Right.
I raised 3 daughters in Parkside Manor. That's what this little area is called.
Right.
My oldest daughter was the first African-American senior executive secretary at TRW. She was born and raised here.
Great.
I said, and you say you know Dr. Buskirk? Yes, he's over that department at USC. I said, well, my second daughter was his assistant for 15 years. And my third daughter is vice president at Mount St. Mary College. So why don't you tell all these people they got a bunch of ignorant people from Watts in these places and they have no education?
Good for you.
I was so mad at that man. He shook hands with everybody on the panel but me.
Wow.
But that's what I resent. If it's the truth, tell it.
Right.
But don't lie.
Right.
And he was lying about stuff in my community, killing, and I told him, it's people like you who kill communities. Because you lie, and the public never know the difference.
Right.
I was coming home, Jim, one day, driving down Century.
Yep.
Just before I got to Central. The guy on Channel 4, I'll never forget it, he started, oh, they got a group gathering, Avalon and Century.
Right.
And it's going to be a riot because it is. And I'm looking around, there's nobody on, nobody, not another car. And I look, what is he talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
So he kept getting so excited about it, I pulled over and stopped. I said, I want to see what he's doing. He kept going. And he kept revving up that lie. I was so angry. I sat there and I let him rip. And I got in my car and I went down to 77. Tom King was the captain.
Sure, yeah.
And I said, Captain, I need some help. I'm going to the station and I need some help. So Ben Perry and then Reverend Kilgore,
Sure.
3 of them, when I called them, they went with me. We went down to that station. And I told that man, I was just at the spot where you said the group was, why would you sit here and lie on the air? I just went up and down. And I said, every time you tell that lie,
Yeah.
we're going to be in this station. And when he saw it, and Reverend Kilgore went up his rear end, and I mean, they really went up. But that's the kind of lies that kills communities.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There was nobody there. There was no
Yeah.
riot start, but he was encouraging people to come there.
Yeah.
So you live through all of that when you live in this community.
I think what impresses so many people about you is your courage and your willingness to step up, no matter whether it's popular or not, and say and do the right thing. You've given us a couple of examples of that now. There are many more that are out there. And so thank you for that, for having the courage, the ability to be able to say, I stand for the right thing and I'm going to do the right thing. And you always refer back to your parents as having instilled that value in you. But you embody that as good as anybody I've ever met.
I thank God every day for my parents.
Yeah.
Because my parents instilled in their children
Right.
what we're supposed to do as human beings.
Right.
Not black, white, or purple. As human beings,
Right.
we had a responsibility.
Right.
And my mom and dad used to tell, I don't care if he's purple. You had better respect that person until they do something to you.
Right.
And that's the way we were raised.
Right. I look through the many years that you've been involved in the community. You mentioned to me earlier some of the other police leaders that you had opportunity to interact with and your perception of them. and how you've seen law enforcement transition over the years, but also the values in all of our communities, not only here, but beyond. Any observations you want to share on that?
I think there's been a lot of hard work within the police department. And when, like I said, when I was testifying and they asked me, you know, about what I felt about the police, I told them honestly the way I thought.
Sure.
And they listened to it. They must have listened because it changed.
Yeah.
Because 6 weeks after I testified, they called me and asked me would I be willing to serve on the oil board.
Yeah.
I was the first minority to ever serve on that oil board, and I served 21 years on it.
Wow. So you had a hand in selecting new officers for the LAPD for 21 years. 21 years. Wow.
In the entry level, promotional up to captain.
Wow.
And I had a many a battle.
Yeah.
A many a fight.
Yeah.
There was one young officer, he was a white officer, and everybody loved him in the community. He had worked with the kids, and everybody loved him. And he was trying to promote to sergeant.
Right.
And I was on that panel, and I was serving with two captains. And that captain that I was serving with was a dog. He was it had nothing to do with race. It had to do with, he was just plain mean.
Right.
So when we were interviewing, he says, the guy had an impeccable record. Everybody in the community loved him. They said he worked with the kids, he helped everybody. But he was dying with leukemia.
Oh, okay.
So this captain says, I'm not going to promote him. 6 months from now, he'll be on taxpayers' money. I said, Captain, we don't have a right to do that. He's earned this promotion. I'm not God. I don't know how long he's going to live. But he has earned this promotion, and you don't have a right to deny him the promotion. Well, he was determined to do it. And the other little guy had no backbone.
Yeah.
He was scared to buck him because he was the number one. And I tried for 20 minutes to get him to understand it was wrong. I said, okay, I'm gonna lock the score. So when one locked the score, the board has to stop. So I locked the score. And the next morning we ended up for the Civil Service Commission. And the Civil Service, the commissioner asked this guy, why didn't you want to promote him? His package, obviously, he was an outstanding officer. Why don't you? He says, well, as I told her, he'll be on taxpayers' money in 6 months.
Wow.
And he said, that's why you didn't want to promote him? Yes. He said, well, as she said, you're not God either. You don't know how long he's going to live. Right. But he went on to the next one. And he was scared to buck him. Well, I have to go along with the captain. I'm not going to promote him either. The commissioner told him, well, let me tell you how this is going to go. He said, as she said, you're not God either. And this young man, from his package, he's a good officer. He has earned this promotion. So I'm going to throw this board out. And she's the only one that can serve on his board. He set up a new board.
Wow.
I got his promotion. He didn't live long, but I got his promotion. I hate injustices.
Yeah.
I don't care who it is.
Right.
And that had nothing to do with race, because the young man was white, and it had to do with his meanness.
Right. Well, thank you again for standing up for doing the right thing.
Well,
on behalf of that sergeant and his family, certainly.
You're gonna decide something like that against a person that has worked as hard as he.
Yeah, no.
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 And it wasn't about race, it was about power. That's what that man was about.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of it is.
Yep.
It's mistaken as race, but it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with power hungry.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of leaders throughout the city that you worked with. Are there others that were leaders in city politics, in the police or in in city council or mayor that you had occasion to come across?
I had some fights with city council.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, I had some big fights with city council. Because you see, city council, I was with the housing authority.
Right.
I was a commissioner with the housing authority, and I was president of the board. But the city council wanted to run the housing authority.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And I had some fights you would not believe. But, you know, if you're wrong, you're wrong.
Right.
I don't care who you are.
Right.
So I've had many a fight with a lot of them, but I did my job.
Yeah. You are very humble, but you have so many accomplishments, not on your own behalf, but on behalf of everybody who will benefit from it. And one that really comes to mind for me is you and your actions about Normont Terrace, a housing development in Harbor City. If you would, could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Absolutely. I had been, Mayor Reardon came in, and he appointed me, he reappointed me as a commissioner. And he said, but there's one condition. You have to be president of the board. And I said, Mayor Reardon, I don't qualify. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't have a degree. He said, I don't give a damn about no degree. I want you to do what you've been doing for the past 10 years as a commissioner. And I said, okay. So I took the job. I'd been on that job about maybe six or eight weeks. And this Hispanic lady came in from Normont Terrace, and she was crying her heart out. She said, the drug dealers have taken over Normont Terrace. She said, I have a 14-year-old son, and now they're recruiting that young.
Yeah.
And she was crying. She said, I have nowhere to go, but I'm so scared because they're recruiting the young people to sell drugs.
Right.
And I'm standing there looking at this lady thinking, oh, Lord, what in the world, what can I do?
Yeah.
Kathleen that's my adopted daughter.
Yeah, I know her well.
She was a lieutenant then with LAPD.
Yep.
And I called her and I said, Kathleen, I want to go to Normont Terrace at night.
That would have been the late 80s.
Yes, I want you to take me to Normont Terrace. She said, okay. She got a van. She got 3 officers. And we went to Normont Terrace at night and drove in. We hadn't been in there 10 minutes before 3 drug dealers approached us.
Yeah.
And I said, now I see what this poor woman is going through.
Right.
I said, okay, that's all I needed to see. So I went back. I told my executive director, make reservations. I'm going to Washington. And I went to Washington to meet with Congress and HUD. And I told them what I wanted to do. I said, it's drug infected, the people can't live there. Let me tear it down and rebuild it as mixed housing. And they laughed. He said, who would live in a project where there's mixed housing?
Right.
I said, how do you know? Have you ever done it? He said, no. I said, then let me try. They laughed. Well, he thought I was going to leave. Every month I was right back in Washington, in their face.
Wow.
So the last time I went, he said, Commissioner, I want to tell you something. He said, we met on your project yesterday, and they decided you're not going to give up. So he said, they said, go ahead and let her do it. She's not going to finish it anyway. Well, I fooled them. I came back and I started looking for a director. And you know who the developer, Bill Whitty.
Oh, yeah.
One of the biggest developers in California now.
Right, right.
And I said, Bill, will you work with me? He said, of course I'll work with you. So he worked with me, and we started tearing it down. We had to relocate the people and started tearing it down. We got halfway through it. He said, we got a problem. He said, I've run out of money. I've put in for a loan, but it'll be 6 months before I can start it. I said, no, we're not going to stop. I'll do a gap loan. So I'll give you the money. When you get the loan, you pay us back. And that's what we did.
Wow.
And we kept going. And when we got through and had the development finished, they couldn't believe it actually is what it is.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and it's not no longer called a project.
No.
It's called Harbor Village.
Yeah. I worked down there at the time you described when it was an open-air drug market, PCP, capital of the Southland, people coming from everywhere to buy their drugs there. And to look at what it was, and after you did what you just described, what it has become, a beautiful place to live, close to the ocean,
Yes.
very, very pleasant, night and day, really. And then to watch that model for mixed-use housing, for public housing developments, take off.
The next year they did that in Chicago.
Oh yeah, Cabrini Green.
To Cabrini Green.
Yeah.
It's now mixed housing.
Yeah.
They've done it all over the country now.
Yeah. It went around Los Angeles first, and then they copied it across the country, and it has changed the model for public housing nationwide.
Yes.
And all of that because you wouldn't say no, you wouldn't go away, you persevered, and you had a good idea, and you were going to make sure that it got at least a fair hearing.
Well, you know, the first place, when people live in public housing, it's not because they're not good people.
Right.
Financially, they're having a problem.
Sure.
And when I went on as a board member, I was shocked the way they treated people in public housing.
Yeah.
They had a president of the board, and I asked him, I said, Al, which one of the commissioners work with the people in the project? He said, what do you mean? I said, which one meet and work with the... He said, we don't do that. We set the rule, they obey the rule, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, well, you got a rebel on the board. I'm not going to sit here and work on any board and make decisions about a person's total life and don't involve them in it. It's not going to happen with me. So I came home and he called me and he said, Ozie, I thought about what you said. He said, if I set up a citywide tenant relations committee, will you chair it? I said, I don't care what I do as long as I can work with the people.
That's great. Again, another model for public housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from that day, public housing was different because I said, you grown people living here. They're adults, they're not children.
Right.
I said, we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars to have the lawn mowed.
Yeah.
These people live in here, they try to get jobs, and as soon as they put the addresses, public housing job disappears.
Right.
I said, we have plenty of money. We can hire our own people from the project. They fought that. So I had to go back to Washington again and fight them and say, why can't we do it? We have the money to do it.
Right.
So I started hiring our own people. Those people were so proud.
Oh, yeah.
They were so proud, and they worked so hard. They said people didn't want to work, but what happened, as soon as they would apply and give the address as public housing, the job disappeared. Nobody would hire them.
Right.
And I kept that program going, and when I left, that fool came in from Texas and stopped that program. They took 2 busloads of people from the project up to Rancho Cucamonga. He had bought a house up there. They picketed that house every day.
Wow.
Because he stopped the job of hiring residents.
Okay. Wow.
Soon as he came in. I wasn't there anymore because he never would have stopped.
Right. Right.
But they just don't give those people a chance. They're good, they're hardworking people, some of them. But they couldn't work because they can't find a job.
Right. You change that.
You know, it's sad though. I was in the store not long ago, and this old lady ran up and she grabbed me and hugged me. I don't even remember her name, Jim. Right. It's been so long. She said, we will never forget you. She said, nobody worked with us the way you did. Nobody cared about us the way you did. She said, those people don't care about us. and I know what's going on, so she's telling the truth.
That's the best kind of compensation you could possibly get, is you changed lives, made people's lives better.
It's so sad, though,
Yeah.
when you're in a position of authority
Yeah,
and you use it to abuse people.
yeah.
That's the worst sin to
Yeah,
me.
I agree.
And they treat those people like they're children.
Yeah,
And having the authority to do it made them feel important. Well, it wasn't important to me.
right.
So it was a lot of changes while I was there, but HUD's been having a lot of problems with them.
Yeah.
So
Looking back on so many years of service, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment? Would it be the public housing story?
I think more than the public housing, I think it was breaking down that wall between the police and the community.
Great.
There was a time when the police over here, they were looked down, hated,
Yeah.
and they didn't care about the community either. Well, they cared, but they were abused so much. It was sad because nobody would talk to anybody.
Right.
Nobody tried to break down the barrier to work together. And that was the saddest thing.
So really furthering community policing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I look at my 40 years in policing in Los Angeles, and we have come a tremendous way from where we were. Always still work to be done. We're a work in progress.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the business. But to have leaders like you in the community step forth and have the courage to speak the truth and to reach out and hold people accountable, we need a lot more of that today than we see out there.
Well, that's why I told that commissioner, I said, it'll never change unless the police and the community work together.
Right.
It'll never change. Standing off hating each other.
Yeah.
And the hate was just growing
Right.
and growing. And I said, how in the world will it ever change?
Yeah.
But that's when that McDonnell Commission really started. I don't know what they did,
Yeah.
but they started to investigate.
Yeah. After the McDonnell Commission, you worked with every chief of police in Los Angeles since that time.
Yes.
And that, I'm sure, was an experience as well. Different personalities, all leading a big department with a lot of scrutiny, and a major transition in policing style. A department that has been understaffed throughout its history, and trying to, as the common phrase, do more with less. But the reality is, if you have less resources, you have to do things at least differently. And I attribute some of the strain between police and community due to police racing from call to call and not having the luxury that some places do, where you can spend time on each call and be able to work with people on crime prevention strategies and goodwill, but rather being tied to get to the next call, and the call load being such that you're racing from call to call without the opportunity to develop relationships on each call. And so the challenge is there. Your observations from different chiefs as to how they dealt with that? You had mentioned to me before Chief Gates.
He was my friend. He was my absolute friend. In fact, one time, Tom Bradley was leaving. John Ferraro was running in his place. And so Chief Gates got on the air, and he was saying, I'm supporting a real man, John Ferraro. And I said, what is he doing? So I called him, because I had his cell number. I called him. I said, Chief, what are you doing? He said, what, Ozie? I said, I just heard you on the radio. You're talking about you supporting John Ferraro and you're picking at Brad. I said, everybody know you and Bradley don't like each other.
Right.
I said, but Chief, do you really need that fight? Why are you going to get in the middle of that mess with him? Why don't you let John Ferraro win or lose on his own? And he said, he got quiet.
Yeah.
So I said, well, Chief, you said I'm your friend. I'm telling you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. So I hung up the phone. The next day, I was packing because I was going to Washington, D.C. Anyway, this man called me. When they hung up, he was real quiet, so I said, Chief is mad at me. Because he hung up, he was real quiet. But the next day, when this man called me, he asked for Ozie Gonzaque. So he said, well, I just got off the phone with Daryl Gates. I don't know who you are. But he told me he wanted me to, he said, you coming to Washington? And I said, yes. He said he told me he wanted me to roll out the red carpet. And if I don't roll out the red carpet for you, I won't be welcome in Los Angeles.
Perfect. So Daryl Gates rolled out the red carpet for you in D.C.?
When I got there, he really did. He rolled out, he picked me up that day. He took me on a tour of the FBI headquarters. I have the pictures in there. And all day. And he said, I don't know who you are, but Daryl Gates sure thinks a lot of you.
Wow, wow.
And you know, we were friends until he died.
Yeah.
I talked to him about a day before he died. He called me from the hospital. And he told me, he said, Ozie, I want you to do something for me. And I said, well, what is it? He said, I want you to do some sensitivity training with my officers. And I said, Chief, I'm not qualified. I said, I don't have a degree in T. He said, I don't give a damn about no degree. I want you to teach them what you taught me.
Very good.
And I worked with that program for 6 years.
Wow.
It, to me, made a difference. Because a lot of times the young officers really did things because they really didn't know any better.
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. A lot of times they did things they really didn't know. And a lot of them used to call me and said, we need you back.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no doubt.
It's about trying to work in a way to help people.
Yeah.
And that's all I ever wanted to do. You know, they called me cop lover. Mm. I was a cop lover, and I said, it isn't about loving anybody. It's about trying to work and bring people together.
Right.
To where we can be effective. We've got to live in a community. They work in the community. We should come to some kind of understanding of working together.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, really. We're all here together at the same time, and we all have different perspectives, but we all want the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, some of them can be crazy.
Yeah.
My son-in-law called me and he said, Mom, he said, I'm so mad. He said, this little boy came in my driveway and broke the window out of my car. Just mean. He didn't steal anything. He said, but I know where he lives and I'm going down there. I said, boy, don't you go down there.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's really amazing. As I said, you and people who care want to know the truth about communities and people, and you find it. There are people who don't want to know the truth.
Right.
They could care less about the truth. And that's so sad to me.
Yep. Because so many lives are affected by that.
Yes. And their life first.
Yeah.
Because you can't live an evil life and feel good.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah.
So they've got to be miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it feeds itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've started to tell you about Steve Gates. He said, I'll send a car over. So he sent the car. I jumped in my car and I got there before they got there. And I got there and I said, oh my God, I don't know whether to call the sheriff or the police, because it was that strip.
Oh, yeah.
One side is county and one side.
Right.
So I called the captain and I said, Captain, I got a problem. I said, I don't know which one to call. He said, what is it? And I told him, he said, I'll send a car. Mm. Well, when the police car pulled up, I went outside. And I said, Officer, I'm the one that called. He didn't let me finish. He just went off on me. Yeah. What are you calling us for? We don't take this. This is for the sheriff. And he just went to start berating me, didn't even wait for me to tell him what had happened. Wow. And when he got through acting a fool, I said, as a matter of fact, I didn't call you. Your boss sent you. And he looked at me, and I just turned around and went back in the house, and I called Captain Gates. And I said, well, Captain, I just got bawled out by your little officer. He said, what do you mean? And I told him what happened. He said, Ozie, get off the phone. He said, that little fool does that to everybody. Not just people in the community. He treated his partners that way.
And gave the public a perception that they didn't deserve of the police.
Yeah.
Yeah. It only takes one to really mess it up for so many others in any profession. We've talked for a while, and I could talk to you for the rest of the day. The pearls of wisdom that you've shared with me and through your book with on so many other issues, I owe you a debt of gratitude. You know, when I think back on just what we've talked about here today, and looking at your life, and some of the qualities that I walk away with are perseverance, integrity, collaboration, wanting to get along with other people, communication. These are all things we talk about in society: transparency, openness, honesty, but things that you have brought out in your experiences that you've done. You know, you didn't just talk about it, you did it all the way. And so if you were to say, you know, briefly, what advice would you give to young people today about leading their lives in a way that'll make them better people and make our society a better place to live? What would you offer?
I always say to young people, when sometimes they complain, sometimes we can be hard on young people when they stump their toe, but we don't ever praise them when they're doing something right.
Yeah.
And that's one mistake that I try not to do, because when they're trying to do right, that's what I try to do with the people in the housing authority.
Yeah.
Don't lump everybody as, you know, if they're doing something good, tell them they're doing something good. So to me, it's important. We all are human beings. Right. We like to think that somebody appreciates what we're trying to do, you know?
Yeah.
You know, because you keep trying and trying and trying, and you wonder, well, it doesn't matter to anybody, you know?
You get feedback. You need positive and negative feedback. Yeah.
That's right.
That's a great lesson. A great lesson.
My friend with the housing authority, she said, I'm really disappointed because there's so much that you did at the housing authority that's not in that book.
Yeah.
But I had to stop it. My daughter was dying, and that was the most important thing at that time.
Absolutely. Well, our hope is that you could sit back down and write another book so that you can finish your story.
My daughter was one. She did so much. She became an explorer when she was just a teenager.
Yeah.
She followed all the way through, and she was such a hard worker. She graduated, and she was vice president at Mount St. Mary College.
Right.
And when I was still there, she called me one day, and she said, Mom, I want to come and speak to your board. And I said, okay. So she came, and she was telling the board, she said, I go to Mount St. Mary College. I graduated from there. She's the first student, first person to ever receive the Estelle Doheny Award, and it was 3 of them she received that had never been received.
You know, I've heard over and over again, as you've told about different experiences, the same values come through over and over again. And one of them you just alluded to there is just, you know, be yourself, stand up for what you believe in, and don't take someone else's word about somebody. Give them a chance until they prove themselves one way or the other.
That's right.
And that's something that I think if we could share that in our society today, so much of what people think is shaped by what they read on social media, and that's an inch deep and a mile wide, but you don't get the nuances or the depth of the story at all. Yeah. So I think a good takeaway would be, like you said in the very beginning of this interview, and your parents told you, you know, make up your own mind. You know, God gave you a mind, and use it.
Don't decide about, you know, what somebody else tell you about somebody. People have their own axe to grind.
Yeah.
And they want you to fight their battle for them, you know.
You've given us some great pieces of advice, some great wisdom that didn't come from a book, wisdom that came from a life well lived. And we wish you many more years to come, but we also want to encourage you to write that next book for the things that you weren't able to get in the first one. Well, you're a balance of humility and confidence, and that's nice to be able to share. I want to thank you for your time today, Ms. Gonzaque. This has been an education for me, and I'm sure for everybody who will have the opportunity to watch this video that we're putting together. Thank you for your time, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your friendship for so many years.
I thank you so much, my friend. It was absolutely a pleasure to meet with you again, and I thank you for taking the time to do that.
Absolutely.